Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. Now today I'm going to be walking you guys through my thought processes for like what I chose to work on for this upcoming NaNo and what I eliminated, like things I was considering writing and like why I decided for and against certain things. And obviously this is like personal to my own writing and works in progress, but obviously like the greater messages and stuff can be applied to like all across the spectrum. Maybe you're like having similar dilemmas, thinking like whether should I work on this, and it doesn't have to be NaNo. Either could be like just anytime if you're just like when you prioritize what you're going to work on, what you're not going to work on. And sorry, enough rambling, let's just get down with it. Now, one of the things which I was considering possibly working on for NaNo was a resumption of the radical rewrite and restructuring of the book formerly known as The Very Last. It does have a new title, but I've been keeping that secret until its eventual publication. But as I've said many times in videos and blog posts, a teaser, the title is comes from a line in one of Charles Chaplin's sound films, and it's not the most obvious one, so it's not The Great Dictator, if that's the only one of his sound films you're familiar with. So anyway, this would be including adding a lot of new material to it, like many new chapters that were not in my like original plans for it at all, or even when I was like going through the like starting to do the radical rewrite back in 2015, and I put it on hiatus for many years because I was just kind of like hitting a wall with a certain aspect of the research I needed to do, particularly the Portuguese world exposition of 1940. I just couldn't find enough information about it, and I also was kind of like dreading having to like do research for that World's Fair in the U.S. for 1939 through 1940 all over again after I had just done it for a book that hadn't been like too long in the past. I mean, it was like fun research. I absolutely loved learning and reading about the World's Fair, but it's just you don't want to repeat research like too soon, because sometimes it can be like boring and you resent it, like why do I have to do this all over again. Just take a break so you can like come to it with fresh eyes and feel like totally happy and excited about it again. And this is a reason that has been played into like multiple other nanos, including camp months for like things I've been doing that are like rewrites instead of coming to it with a fresh slate or just like editing it. It's a lot trickier to copy and paste text into the master word count file when it's not 100% new. Like for example, that would include chapters in progress, reworked lines and paragraphs, and new words like retained or rephrased, like old things like that. And just like you're like coming to that like sometimes in the middle of a paragraph. It's not like brand new material, so just like obviously like like select all, like copy and paste. Like for example, oh, you're only doing a few like sentences in a paragraph, or like a few like words within like a sentence like that. So it's just like just a lot trickier. And in general, rewriting requires a slower, more careful writing process. You can't just like bang in there and like just write out all the words on your mind like you're coming to it like with fresh inspiration. You have to think, oh, this fits together with this, and I have to keep in mind, oh, this came before, and so if I did this, that would have to like fit with what had already happened in the story, what I'm planning for the future. So you basically have to have a great familiarity with everything. Like for example, you've been away for it for a while, you're just like not familiar anymore with like a certain chapter, and you're like putting things in that totally contradict what happened previously. You just like not remembering things. So again, you have to write a lot slower when you're doing a rewrite, and particularly when you're doing it for NaNo. That's just like not conducive to like inspiring new material, particularly when it involves like a lot of research. And as I previously mentioned, The Very Last does have a number of research heavy chapters, like for example like the Portuguese world exposition, and I mentioned the World's Fair, in addition like Coney Island and the 1940 election and the election season, and just like a bunch of other historical things like that. I absolutely love historical research. That's one of the reasons I absolutely love the genre of historical fiction, but that's kind of can slow you down when you're writing for NaNo, because like you have to like take time out of your like writing process and like, oh, look up this online, or like in books in the library. Yes, believe it or not, some of us still do our research the old-fashioned way through printed material. And like, yeah, I did like count words I wrote down in my little notebooks for like researching different things and counted them, but that's just not the same as actually writing your fresh new words, and it just slows everything down. And to reiterate, it's just like a matter of incorporating your research into the book, plus the time you're taking away from the book to do it, and that just kind of can lead to a lot of frustration and resentment. And sometimes that makes you feel like, oh, do I really have to work on this? I want to put it on hiatus. I'm losing my motivation for it, because you're just like not coming to it with the right state of mind, or not taking care of all your research like during like a period you're putting the book on hiatus, or before you start to work on it, or things like that. So you just have to find your own like rhythm and schedule, things like that. Now the book which I was most strongly considering and hoping to do for NaNoWriMo, in which I ended up changing my mind about, I believe it was just earlier this month was I'm finally resuming and finishing A Dream Deferred, Lyuba and Ivana University, which is the fourth book in my family saga about my Russian characters. And this would not just be like finally like writing the last like five-ish chapters or so, but going back and writing some brand new chapters, which I put in my like notebook of like things to like add and take out and things to like flesh out and such like that, and adding like new scenes to existing chapters and like moving stuff around. So it's basically just kind of like a freaking nightmare and a headache thinking of all this editing I'll have to do when I'm finally finished with it, like in addition to the new material. And there was like a possibility, now knowing me, this probably wouldn't happen, but you never know, that the new material could have been under 50K, which is a minimum requirement to win NaNo. I've always like overachieved, even though unfortunately last year I barely crawled across the finish line with like just like barely over the bare minimum, like 10 minutes to midnight. I was like absolutely humiliated. That's not what I know I'm capable of, and hopefully, God willing, I will redeem myself this year. And like again, and I'm 2020 also had a really humiliating NaNo. It was only 53K, and that was also really like difficult and frustrating. And it's always very difficult to write a book out of order, and particularly when you're like moving chapters around. As I've mentioned in my blog many times, I made a really stupid mistake. I 100% blame myself. I like arrogantly engaged in presentism, which is basically judging the past by present standards. And I kind of assumed like all universities would always begin in the first week of September, sometimes even late August. And so I like have these characters starting their universities at the time, and then I come to find out, oh, they were beginning in like the last week of September, sometimes even like the first week or 2 weeks of October. And so that totally like throws off the timing, and you have to like move chapters around and like move scenes out of some chapters and move them into others, and basically just like rearrange all this timing. That's like a huge headache. And I did look up the timelines of when these universities did begin, so I have the correct dates down. I just recently did a blog post about like how to research writing about historical education and historical fiction. I had a whole boatload of links to things like newspapers and such you can look up when these universities started. And another difficult thing, if I had chosen A Dream Deferred, which would be incorporating new characters which haven't been like written onto the page yet. They're just like in my mind and planning to insert, like at a certain point they would enter the story and become friends with the main characters, and like other like developments with the material. So basically, again, you're not just like coming to it with a blank slate, and you're also not just like editing and moving stuff around. You're also having to deal with, oh, these characters who I don't know, oh, they would exist now, and it's like plopping them onto the page, and these like developments that I didn't like plan out or write through organically from the start until like the middle and the finish and such. I would have to incorporate all that stuff. So it's basically just like a huge headache. In addition, really another big one is a lot of storylines are going to have to be removed. Like some of them like really good. Like for example, two of the characters get pregnant out of wedlock, and like one, like her boyfriend realizes, oh, I really love this woman, and I've been falling in love with her despite thinking, oh, it was only like a fun time and sex and stuff, and I really want to marry her. And they like have their baby. She's born at like 26 weeks, and she thankfully survives, and it brings them much closer together. And the other couple, they realize they're like totally incompatible, and they were pretty much incompatible from the jump, and this like accidental pregnancy like really just exacerbates what a train wreck their relationship is, and like they have a much unhappier ending. So that's going to be moved to the fifth book, because obviously that's like really well written storyline. It's way too good to like completely get rid of. And there are a couple of other storylines I realized I just wasn't writing them very well, and like they were just like resolved like way too quickly, and then like never really spoken of again. And those will also be moved into the fifth book, but like a couple of other ones will be completely entirely removed, and that will basically like change the entire structure of the rest of the book, and it'll have to be like written with like the new like storylines to replace it, or like it never even existed. Particularly with the Konebs moving back to New York City, I was so excited about this storyline. I've written many blog posts about it, but I came to realize this was like a bad idea, because I kept going back and forth about like where they should live, which schools, which characters should be going to, like what neighborhood, what type of house, like for example in an apartment, a townhouse, a penthouse, a detached house in one of the outer boroughs, things like that. And it never really came together in the right way. And so I just figured like just keep them in the Twin Cities. This is where they've been like putting down some deep roots lately. They can't like really like go home again to their small farming village, because they've realized that's not who they are anymore, and that was never really who they were to begin with. They belong in the Twin Cities, and like New York City, most of their friends and family live there, but again, that's just not the place they were meant to be. And so anyway, like there's a lot of decisions they'll have to make, like moving stuff around and like just basically everything. It's like a whole cluster. What I don't really want to deal with that at all during NaNo. Now, I was also considering resuming my alternative history about Dante and Beatrice, which I began in June of 2021, and I like worked on it like really like passionately for a while, but unfortunately I put it on hiatus for like some months now. It wasn't because I lost like interest or passion for the project, like God forbid. It was just like it was taking too much out of me, all this like research, and particularly because I was working on it during Camp Nano months, and that was just like I had to take all this time away. And like it's not just like doing the research and like taking the time away. It's like you have to like figure out how to incorporate it. Like for example, like if you're writing a Christmas scene in the 20th century, you pretty much like know what to write about. Although maybe you might have to research like specific cultural things, like for example, what they would eat at a traditional like Polish or Russian or Ukrainian or like Argentinian or whatever Christmas Eve feast, or like different like cultural aspects of the holiday, or for any holiday really. But when you're like looking in the Middle Ages, it's like totally unfamiliar to you, so you have to like, okay, this is how they would observe the 12 days of Christmas, and this was what each specific day of Christmas had certain things associated with, and these were like the kind of plays monks would do from town to town. Like how are you like going to choose which aspects of that you want to include in the story, which would be important, like how are you going to write about that, and just like things like that, particularly when you're writing about an era you're not really familiar with, like the back of your hand, like I am with the 20th century. And when you come back to a story that's been on hiatus for a while, like you have to write slower and more carefully. You're like picking up in the middle of a chapter, and it's not you've lost passion for the book, God forbid. It's just like, oh, this was the way I was going, and now I have to like get back and like figure out the research. And once you get over that hump, you can go on with it. And I was like writing the alternative history out of order anyway. That was just helping me go so much faster, because again, like I had to do research during NaNo, and that was just totally slowing me down. And then when I got past like the part that was basically all like my own imagination, and I got back to a part that required more heavy research, it was like I was hitting a brick wall again. So I will get over that hump when I do finally resume it, but it's just like, again, a NaNo month is not the month you want to like be figuring out these things like, oh, I have to write slower, and that's like slowing down your entire word count, and it's making you feel like really like frustrated, like kind of like lose, like I know I can write so much better and quicker than this, but I'm just like way too like slowed down, and this is like really hurting my writing morale. Now instead, what I did very happily decide I'm going to be working on, this will be a near total gut renovation of the book formerly known as Almost as an Afterthought, the first 6 months of 1941, which is the fourth and final book in my prequel series about my Atlantic City characters, and it does not have a new and improved title, even a secret one, although obviously I will be like hopefully I obviously have to figure out a new title when it's published. And the reason it did have that working title is because originally I had only planned on 3 books in the prequel series, in which the kind of like simple like titles, the very first, the very next, and the very last. And as an adult, I obviously realized, oh, those aren't really like publication, like memorable, like good titles, but I do still emotionally think of that way. And because I hadn't planned to do a 4th book at all, like I just called it, Almost as an Afterthought, and that it really does seem like almost as an afterthought. In the original first draft, it's like only 11,000 words, which is like not even a novella length. It's just novelette length. And I wrote it over like in August of 1997, from the 12th to the 27th of August, and I was like all writing by hand, and then I transcribed it into the computer, I believe like 1998, maybe 1999. And so like weren't really that many changes at all made, and it obviously requires a huge amount of work that's not a book length, that's just like a short story length. Now, almost no original material is going to be retained for this, because the chapters are just kind of like, short and simplistic, and they're just like, obviously the characters have not really changed like that much, but I just realized I need to take them in a much different direction. They've evolved to be like so much more complex. The chapters are just like so kind of like flimsy and simplistic. They need like huge fleshing out of these, like it needs a lot more historical detail. When I look back, I'm like kind of stunned at the way I was writing as like a preteen, and even like well into my teens. There's not really that much historical detail in my Atlantic City books. They really feel like more like they're teens and like preteens, kids who happen to live in the like late 30s and the 1940s. But they're acting more like people from the 1990s. Obviously, that was all I know, and it's just like there's really not many historical details at all for these like original drafts when I was much younger, and that obviously needs a lot of correction. A few key episodes will be retained and rewritten, because obviously they are important to the overall trajectory, and it's not going to be a complete rewrite. Obviously there's going to be like some good bones retained, but like pretty much everything else is going to be like radically changed, so it fits into the direction I like chose to take these characters in, and like their overall storylines and growth throughout the years. And now part of the 3 write will be like a chapter I originally wrote, I believe it was in 2020 NaNo, which was for like the book formerly known as the very next, and I need to like rework and finish portions of it. Like part of that chapter I put into the book formerly known as the very last for like another chapter. And like I realized like that would fit better in like that book and that chapter, and like another part of it would fit much better in the fourth book, because that's just the way it unfolded. I realized it really didn't belong in the very next, because like the way it was unfolding was making the book like way too long and complex. Like even I have standards, and I meant it to be like fairly short and sweet. And it's still, I think it was like 105,000, maybe 110,000 words. The very next final word count was, but like if I had kept that in, it was just like ballooning and ballooning, and I just felt it would be like more natural and be so much more like good for the plot and the characters as they were unfolding if it like ended up in almost as an afterthought. Now this is going to be something that is extremely hard for me after like almost 31 years with these characters. The key storyline in the almost as an afterthought is predicated on the characters' age changing, and now always from the very beginning when I first wrote them into existence on the 25th of November of 1991, which is a few weeks before my 12th birthday. Yes, believe it or not, I am really that old. I look much younger than I really am. Like they were born in like late, the oldest of them were born in like late 1929, and most of them were born throughout 1930, particularly at the last quarter of the year, and like a few of them were born in the spring of 1931. But like as I like came older, and like it's probably been about like 12, 11 years I've been like really wrestling with it, because like the way they act and talk, even if it's like a deliberate satire and it's kind of for shock value, they're supposed to look and act and talk and think like a fair bit older than they really are, because of like the magic of this like quasi secret society of sorts called WTCOAC, We the Children of Atlantic City. It still doesn't feel like realistic, and like is lampshading really lampshading when like even the writer is like feeling, oh, this really doesn't feel right, particularly with like the wild bad kid behavior they do with their worst. Like it, like for example, it's like shocking, but kind of like shocking for a purpose and like real satirical effect, and not like that implausible. Like obviously it shouldn't happen at all, but if it does, it it's not completely out of the realm of believability when they have like 12-year-olds like start experimenting with sex with one another, not with like much older like creepers grooming them. But like if you're like 10, 11 years old doing that, that's like really creepy and very disturbing, like child safeguarding red flags all over the place. And I don't want like people to think I'm like that just because I had my characters originally doing that in certain ages, and just so many other things I've mentioned in many blog posts where I just really, really am coming to feel like the cognitive development is all off. These characters don't read at all like they're actual supposed ages, even if they like really are for like the sake of lampshading and like dramatic license, like supposed to be much like acting much older than and looking much older than they really are. It just like feels so off. And so anyway, the key storyline is about like Cinnamon, the main character, and her friends are going to be graduating grade school. As originally written, they were only like ending the fourth grade, and she is Cinnamon is hoping to start that progressive track for her junior high school. I later wrote it into the school, which has all grades through grade 1 through grade 13, which is a real thing in some places, and also like something called final year. So it's basically like 2 grades worth of junior college. And the book, it has like the general, the honors, the college prep, and the progressive track. And like Cinnamon becomes absolutely enthralled with the idea of attending the progressive track when she like goes to a bazaar in the bohemian quarter of her neighborhood, and the very next, and she's like so gung-ho about it. I want to improve myself, and I really like school now. I've developed and discovered a special passion for like history and world languages. I want to do more with my life than like her mother is just like like a bored housewife who never really did anything besides modeling, and then like basically just like retreating into like being a lazy couch potato who sits around the house all day. And so basically like Cinnamon is like with her mother like a conflict. Oh, I want to go, and her close friend Kid is also with her mother. They have a much more acrimonious relationship. Cinnamon doesn't have like never really has a close lovey-dovey relationship with her mother, but at least there's like love and like regard like really, really deep down when you like scratch the surface. But Kit and her mother are like totally, they're total enemies. Her mother absolutely hates her, and like Kit finally like shoots back, but that's for another topic. And if I had decided to leave their original age as is, like for example, even if I had decided to like leave out the bad kid behavior, they would only be leaving the fourth grade at the end of this book, and that's not real like a big like end to like a coming of age series. Like what's the big like storyline? Oh, they go through their fourth grade year. Oh, so what? And like there's no real like conflict in that story at all. So, and I obviously, if it does feel wrong for me, I will like keep their age back to the way it used to be, but I just really feel like even though it's like difficult emotionally after almost 31 years with them and like knowing them as these specific ages and doing certain coming of age milestones and certain years, like for example, like they'll graduate high school or junior high in certain years, or they're like going off to college or start having children at these ages and these years, I just really feel like it would make a lot more sense, like structurally and like for the sake of plot and just basically like realism and cognitive development and such like that. And since I have been with these characters for so very long, basically an entire lifetime, we really grew up together because we've known one another since we were 11 years old. The story kind of writes itself. I just know who these characters are. I don't, obviously I do have a little bit of research. I wrote all the like, the basic chapter by chapter notes and some other things about, like just like cultural things and things to keep in mind, like the names of the stores and the little like plaza in their town, just like, like cultural customs. Like Cinnamon is half, I believe, around half Polish, and so like basically like certain like things she would do. She's not a Catholic like most Poles are. She's like basically a secular Methodist, but they do observe like a lot of like cultural things that come from Polish Catholicism around the holidays. And basically just like, for example, they're going on a big school field trip to Philadelphia near the end of the year, and I'm writing down like different things about like the historic houses and museums in Philadelphia she would have really liked and all sorts of other stuff. And yes, believe it or not, some of us still use this old-fashioned thing called cursive writing. Sorry if that's not really like in focus there. That looks a little bit better. And I really do feel after the last few years of like basically choosing the wrong projects at the time for like NaNo and Camp Nano months, like, starting in media res really inhibits the creative momentum, and you really just want to like start fresh with the project. Or if you can't start fresh with a brand new project, at least, come with something you've been like passionately, steadily writing for a long time and haven't, like being putting on hiatus for like 2 years or 6 months or whatever. Don't have to take a lot of time out to do research. So basically you're just like continuing what you're doing like uninterrupted. And I really feel like I kind of like gave up without trying the last 2 nanos, as well as like many of the Camp Nano months during that time. Yes, it's true, like lockdown really did kind of like wreck my mental health. That triggered my cyclical depression, particularly because I wasn't able to go to the library to write and, guaranteed privacy for like a couple of hours 6 days a week. But, obviously you have to like own up to your own responsibility too. Yes, I gave into like so many distractions. Like I chose to like, fool around looking at stuff online or doing jigsaw puzzles or like reading or doing like other things instead of just like focusing my all on writing like I did the years I was like really massively overachieving and doing close to what I know I'm capable of. Like even my best year, which was almost 131,000 words, I still felt like I could have done a lot better. So that basically says like I know I can write over at least 100,000 words a month, and I failed to do that. I just like didn't set enough time out of the day for writing. I didn't like get like conquer my temptations to like do other things and like be distracted by all these like things competing for my attention, just like write the whole months long, because I totally failed. Now since 2017, when half of my word count was the actual work in progress and the other half was consisted of blog posts, I have been counting my blog posts which I write during the month of November as creative nonfiction. 2017, I don't think I would have been able to complete NaNo if I hadn't done those blog posts. If you're wondering, it was my 12-part series called The Jazz Singer at 90. It was like so awesome to do all that research and writing and like gathering the images and such. I really do feel like that, gave me back my writing mojo, across these like then 90 years. Like the great, incredible charisma of Al Jolson like touched me and like made me like finally have my writing mojo back and finally was excited about writing again. So that really, like, thank you, Jolie. And because I'm so determined to redeem myself from like really pitiful below par NaNo showings of the last 2 years, I'm doing like pretty much like as many November blog posts in advance as I can do. I've been like really packing them in there, finishing up my like October horror series, and this is going to be one of those years when it continues into early November, and I've pretty much like gotten almost all the horror movie blog posts written, as well as like a bunch of book posts, which are also going to go live in November, because I just want as much time as possible set aside to my writing in November. Thank you very much for listening. As always, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment. Particularly comment. I love like getting to know you guys and like just finding out who my subscribers and viewers are and becoming like friends with these guys, and hopefully like building my channel and building a greater community. And hopefully my next videos will be about Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf. I'm currently writing a 3-part blog series about this on my main blog, you know, like my personal relationship with the novel, general plot overview, and like a behind the scenes legacy and reception. This is one of the books that absolutely most changed my life. So if you're oh, and I will be like doing these in advance so they can, you know, go live throughout November, and I'll still have, you know, like some video output. So if you love Hermann Hesse and you enjoy my book review post, look ahead to that. If you're doing NaNo, good luck to you guys, and thank you again for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.